Hi, I'm Sarah Cowgill, along with Andrew Moran, Graham Noble, Jeff Charles, and Scott Cosenza. And this is the Conservative 5, Liberty Nation's online TV news program. On today's episode, upping the political stakes, we take a look at what happened at former President Trump's estate in the raid on Mar-a-Lago, and what's behind the curtain in the latest push by our friends in the swamp in the segment Inflation Reduction? The Conservative 5 will discuss the latest in the battle over illegal immigration in the episode Abbott Immigrant Express Exasperates Liberals. And of course, we will have a full-on rumble in Just for Fun, Volume 17. All this and more coming up in this edition of the Conservative 5. It was astonishingly unprecedented. The raid on Mar-a-Lago. President Trump wasn't in Florida when it happened, and it's been widely reported that he was in New York. As news and vague details trickle out of the media, questions abound that haven't been answered as of yet. I know folks in my circles have questioned what was even in the search warrant, and others want to know what legal waters does the 45th president find himself in now. Scott Cosenza, Liberty Nation's legal affairs editor, is on board to help us understand the ramifications of this latest political hot potato. Scott?
Well, the answer to your question is he's in treacherous waters, Sarah. He faces a potential criminal indictment, a federal criminal indictment. Well, we know, if we believe the published sources from Newsweek and the Wall Street Journal this week, who they alone have basically published accounts from insiders in the DOJ regarding the raid. And they say that it was pursuant to a grand jury's decision that the Presidential Records Act was broken. And also that there is an insider within the Trump camp that reported both that Trump has lied to National Records basically archivists about what he has, and also pointed out to authorities the specific locations of documents that he's not allowed to basically continue to hold. He also faces criminal charges in New York City by the Manhattan DA potentially, and also civil charges by Letitia James, the New York State Attorney General, who he was deposed by this week and pled the fifth, which doesn't have any implication with respect to criminal charges that she may issue, but because it's a civil matter, she would be allowed in a subsequent civil case to basically present the information before a jury that he pled the fifth, and then they could then hold that against him. So it's quite a bit that he may have to face here.
Graham, what you got going on?
Well, obviously, the entire thing is rather intriguing. I did notice that a recent media report in a website called Just the News is actually now reporting that, in fact, Trump had already, prior to the raid, been cooperating with the FBI, had allowed them to search his private storage unit. And apparently that all went off kind of very cordially. Trump in person was apparently there at the time. And of course, that therefore does lead one to speculate that this raid perhaps was more about publicity than anything else, making a public statement. I'm not necessarily saying that the FBI has taken it upon themselves through some kind of real or imagined political bias to do that. But nevertheless, it does seem curious that since Mr. Trump apparently was already cooperating with the Department of Justice, that they would then choose to do this kind of raid, which is obviously going to be the most high profile FBI enforcement action, in living memory, I guess. So that's all kind of intriguing. I don't know. Scott has presented obviously the sound legal argument there that suggests that potentially Mr. Trump is in a lot of trouble. I still think I think it may or may not be a bit of a stretch to charge him criminally over anything to do with holding classified documents, because I can't imagine any president in living memory who has left the White House without taking classified documents with them. Obviously, that's me just speculating, but I'm willing to bet. I'm willing to
You don't need
go
to,
to
you don't need to
Vegas and put
speculate
money
there,
on that.
Graham. I can tell you that one of the things that Trump posted on his social media account after the raid was pieces from an article by Jim Bovard. I think he was writing for the New York Post. And Bovard, if you don't know him, boy, everybody needs to look him up because he's a brilliant exposer of government over abuse, basically.
Yes. Yep.
Freedom in Chains, I think, is one of his great books. Anyway, he details how from Nixon through to Trump, every president basically has violated in some way or fashion this law. And for Trump, it's not even a denial of, like a longstanding denial of holding these documents from the public. You could argue that the Clinton administration, that we still don't have access to some of their documents. And Joe Biden did a two-step, by the way, where his documents that he provided to a Delaware library were supposed to have been released within 2 years of his retirement from the Senate. And then when that changed, when he ran for president to 2 years after he retires, basically from public life. So you're right. It's not speculation. They've all done it. But it seems like the enforcement action is just against Mr. Trump.
Well, Jeff, I've been noticing on the media, people are trying to call it not a raid anymore. Was it a raid? Are we talking a raid here, like the classic sense of it? Or are we just trying to listen to the spin and make it sound prettier than it is?
Well, I mean, if this had occurred at Barack Obama's house, it would definitely be a raid. but I mean, it is worth, arguing that term. I mean, because they didn't go in and kick the doors down with their guns drawn and things like that. But it was still the serving of a warrant. And I agree with Scott and with Graham. I mean, this could potentially be an issue, but it could also be a whole lot of nothing on a sesame seed bun. One thing that I've seen other people saying on social media and elsewhere is that this could possibly not even be about those documents. They could have served that warrant as a pretext to possibly come across or stumble upon something else that could be used against them, like perhaps something related to January 6th or something else that can be used against them. Right now, we don't really know, because we don't know what they found, and we probably won't know for a while. I expect for the Justice Department to be pretty tight-lipped about this. They may say, they're going to say, we don't comment on ongoing investigations and all those types of things. But politically, so far, I'm not saying that this is damaging Trump that much. Now, again, this could change later on. But right now, if anything, the base has been consolidated around him because they view this as the use of the government to attack a political rival.
Andrew, why are you so quiet? That's starting to scare me a little.
Because I'm surrounded by geniuses. I have nothing really too much to add. But Jeff made a point about the politics of it. If you look at some of the reaction on social media from Jack Posobiec to Tim Young, right away they're all saying this is going to embolden Trump and this is going to be the start of his 2024 run and this is going to help him and it's going to bring all the Republicans to vote for him. And so that could possibly be the case, especially if some of the allegations are correct that the right is making. But I do have a question though when it comes, perhaps Scott can answer this. There was a lot of I shared a clip with Sarah recently. It was a double side. On one side was talking about the 2016 election of Hillary Clinton and all her emails. The other side of the clip was showing the FBI on Mar-a-Lago. Now, what's the key difference though between, let's say, what happened with Clinton and Clinton's emails and what happened with Trump? Why would there be an ounce of hypocrisy on the right when it comes to the emails of what Trump has? I mean, shouldn't the right also be advocating for FBI intervention there and combing through documents?
Orange man bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, but because the left would say, the right is saying that this is banana republic stuff, and that you're going after your political opposition. But then wouldn't let's say there was something in Hillary Clinton's emails, and you raided Hillary Clinton's home, wouldn't that also be banana republic stuff? So what's the key dichotomy aside from orange man bad?
Well, I think you're comparing two things that have some similar aspects, but calling them the same, and I don't think they are the same. So this is about the Hillary Clinton case was about an ongoing mishandling of that information, and she was not the president of the United States. And let's just take one issue, if we might, which is classification. I think the president of the United States is the only person that has the unilateral power to classify or declassify certain documents.
I believe that's true.
So it is a sort of like a king-like, or if it were Hillary Clinton in some dystopian alternate universe, queen-like power, where they just by, like magic, this is declassified. It could be the nuclear codes. It doesn't matter if the president publishes it, that it's declassified. And you could argue that by retaining possession of it after his presidency, that he declassified it or authorized that for himself. I think this is a little bit of a sort of an angels dancing on the head of a pin question where, did the president go 56 miles an hour in a 55-mile-an-hour zone? Maybe. Why are we arguing about this like it's an actual, a crime where, for me, I'd like to get and talk about basically common law crimes versus these sort of new crimes. Common law crimes being, you don't need to have a sophisticated analysis to know that murder, rape, arson, kidnapping, those are all crimes, right? But holding on to this piece of paper one day past when you say I should, or when the law says, the idea that we would raid a past president's home and maybe subject him to incarceration for that, we triage these things all the time. And that's why I would suggest to you, that's why no one has ever gone against the list of presidents from Nixon on down that have done this, because it's seen as a nothing burger, but only when I presume it can be used to not only damage Donald Trump generally, but specifically prevent him from seeking office. One of the penalties upon conviction of this crime, violating the Presidential Records Act, is the inability to run for future office. And many who are looking at this raid skeptically think that is the real kind of reason behind it.
I have one quick question, not to be the Juan Williams of the C5 today, but I see a lot of the left's reaction saying, if you're pleading the fifth, then that automatically means you're guilty. So can Scott please verify that if pleading the fifth means you're guilty?
I'm sorry, we got to wrap it up, but and I'm sure we'll be back to talk about this all again with the same lovely panel I have today.
No.
Well, as we reported earlier, this action is unprecedented. As things unfold, we will keep you in the loop. Thanks, panel. President Joe Biden and the Democrats have a plan to cure inflation. Spend and print more money. It's called the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022, and it's being marketed as a cure for inflation. A dandy way to trim the budget deficit and grow the economy through green energy. And here's the kicker. This legislation is touted to save the middle class. Is it just a bunch of hooey? Andrew Moran, our head genius in the economics department, is here to tell us how this could possibly work or not. Hit it, Mr. Moran.
Okay, so Inflation Reduction Act, it doesn't stop inflation. It doesn't make any significant dent to the budget deficit. It raises taxes, and the IRS has more power. And then you can end the segment there. But if you look at all the estimates, all the studies, the Joint Committee on Taxation, they say that tax will rise on every income category except for those making between $10,000 and $30,000. You look at the Penn-Wharton budget model. Budget deficit will only fall $89 billion if the Obamacare subsidies will be extended, and they most likely will. CBO, they say the GDP growth will be over a little more than 0.2% over a decade. But if you look at other estimates, they say it's going to fall by 0.1%. The Tax Foundation says it will cost 30,000 jobs. But the administration, they say that, but 129 economists champion and advocate the IRA. And one of them, Biden loves touting this guy. He loves touting the Moody's. Moody's endorses the IRA or the Inflation Reduction Act. But if you look at some of what Moody's says, Moody's makes all these cases that the JCT makes, the CBO make, that it's not going to have much impact on the gross domestic product or the budget deficit. The only thing it really does is that it advances the green energy economy. In addition, if you look at this whole silly minimum corporate tax rate stuff, it also shows a completely fundamental misunderstanding of economics. Corporations don't pay taxes taxes. Consumers pay taxes. Those taxes are passed on to shoppers in the form of higher prices. If you look at many studies showing the same thing, it shows that the labor are the ones who are impacted most by higher corporate income, corporate tax rates, particularly young, inexperienced workers who are just trimmed off the payroll. So overall, this does nothing. And one extra thing too is funny about this whole Inflation Reduction Act is that it gives the IRS $87 billion more over the next 10 years. Now, the administration
we all get our personal agent, don't we? Isn't that
exactly? Yeah, that's that. But what's funny about this whole giving the IRS more money to audit the people is that Karine Jean-Pierre was asked, are people going to make under $400,000? Are they going to be audited more? And Karine Jean-Pierre said, nope, no new audits under people making under $400,000, which is complete nonsense. And that's poppycock, that's balderdash, that's pish posh. And then one other thing too, Ro Khanna, he said the other day that, if you pay your taxes, you have nothing to hide. But that's just like the Bush Republicans who said, if you're not committing a crime, then who cares if you're being spied on? Even nothing to hide. You let the government just intrude upon your privacy. So, the Inflation Reduction Act is a terrible piece of legislation. It's not going to do anything. All it is a slimmed down version of Build Back Better.
Okay, so the next person that says IRA instead of the Inflation Reduction Act, I'm going to find a way to hurt you, because every time somebody says that, Andrew, I feel like something's going to blow up instead of,
Well, I can't imagine why you'd ever feel that way, Sarah.
I get PTSD every time someone mentions
the Republican army is in my backyard. All right, who's up next?
Yeah, I will say that after hearing what Andrew said, I am shocked. I am completely shocked that they would come up with legislation supposedly designed to reduce inflation that has absolutely nothing to do with reducing inflation and is just another way for them to push their agenda. I'm shocked that they would do something like this, to beef up the IRS and to push their green energy stuff. I could use another word there, but I'm not going to. That's what this is. And even when I first heard about it, I was like, yeah, this isn't going to have anything to do with inflation, because they don't care about inflation. They don't care about what the average citizen is going through. They're just trying to stuff a lot of agenda items in here that will push what they want forward.
May I add one more thing here with what Jeff just said, because the whole administration said that the whole purpose is to reduce inflation. But if inflation is coming down right now, coming down eased in July, then shouldn't this just be thrown into the trash bin? Shouldn't the Inflation Reduction Act just be tossed aside now that, according to Joe Biden, inflation is 0%? So there you go. You don't need it anymore. Move on.
All right, Andrew, you just made the exact point I was going to make. It's like they just told us inflation. The last
Exactly.
inflation rate was 0%. We have no inflation, therefore we don't need to reduce inflation.
I think Obama was didn't he argue for a jump starting of the economy that was already moving down the highway? Do I have that right, or was that another politician and their analogy? I would just like to say that Andrew's a Canadian, and he can say whatever he wants, and I think that the people of the IRS do a thankless job, and I'd like to thank them for it and their collection of the taxes that Americans pay. I've got no quarrel with you folks.
That was Scott Cosenza for those people in the IRS that might be listening in today. Right. He's a good guy. He always pays his taxes. I can guarantee that.
Well, what's funny, if you see those job ads now for more IRS agents, you see some of the prerequisites, how to handle a handgun, working 50 hours a week, be on call all the time. I mean, I'm expecting these little nerds with pocket protectors having these bazookas and going and knocking down people's doors and say, give me all your tax returns. Give it to me.
I had a cousin who was an IRS agent, and she carried all the time. She had a gun on her all the time. I don't think it's a very fun job, but somebody's got to do it, right?
There's a reason they say taxation is theft. I mean,
armed taxation. Okay,
yeah.
Well,
Scott would never say that though.
But I find funny that you could look at like Joe Manchin. I mean, this guy was so concerned before about higher taxes and stopping inflation. All of a sudden, he tergiversates and says, "Oh, this bill doesn't do anything." I mean, he was on Fox News. They were talking to Faulkner, and she was bringing up these tax rates. He says, "Oh, they're completely wrong. They don't know what they're talking about." And then Karine Jean-Pierre, or KJP, she was saying the same thing. All these people just don't know what they're talking about. And that's the new mantra of this administration. They keep making that exact same point. Oh, people, you think the country's in a recession, it's just because you don't know what you're talking about. That's why you think the country's in a recession, or why you think this Inflation Reduction Act is going to raise your taxes.
Well,
Hey, if it
Andrew, and that's
sells,
why we
why
have
not?
you on board so that you can explain it to people like me and most Americans. Who wants to have the last word? And then I'll
Okay,
close.
let's look at this way though. So let's say the budget deficit. So their claim is that the budget deficit will be reduced by $300 billion based on their forecasts. Now that's unlikely, but if it is, that's completely irrelevant because the administration under the previous budget, they forecast that they're going to be adding $14 trillion to the federal deficit over the next 10 years. So $300 billion over 14 trillion, do your math. That's hardly anything. And notice another thing too is that this is based on on this current administration. The next administration or the administration after that, they're going to pass all these other gigantic spending bills. It's just going to add to the federal deficit and add to the federal budget. Plus, when you have rising interest rates, that's going to add more to the debt servicing payments too. So overall, everything that these politicians do, they never really tackle the heart and soul of what's really troubling Washington, which is this astronomical levels of debts and deficits, and nothing ever solves whether you're Republican or Democrat. Republicans may add, say $1 trillion to the national debt, and Democrats will add $1.2 trillion to national debt, but nothing gets solved.
Andrew, you're not looking on the bright side. We're all going to have wind-powered cars soon.
And we're going to be eating bugs.
Buy Bitcoin.
You
Right,
eat
well-
the bugs and like it.
It kind of looks like our panel doesn't view the Inflation Reduction Act such a positive light as the Biden bunch. Thanks for watching. Thanks, guys. Texas Governor Greg Abbott's immigration practices have the open borders crowd outraged. It started with his pledge last spring to continue building the wall on the southern border, followed by an increase in the presence of state law enforcement and the National Guard to help curb illegal crossings. But the good governor has upped his game by busing the undocumented folks to the nation's capital in the Big Apple. The mayors of these two cities are calling the 2,000 or so folks a surge. Really? Jeff Charles is all over the latest salvo coming out of Texas. He even coined the phrase, the Abbott Immigrant Express. Sir Charles, give us the latest.
Yeah, the Abbott Express is my favorite source of political entertainment nowadays. I am loving this. It's in full action, and it is the best form of transportation since the John Galt line. I'm loving seeing the Democrats melt down over this whole thing. Abbott and also I'll give credit to Arizona Governor Doug Ducey. They're shipping a lot of these illegal immigrants to DC and most recently to New York. Now, the mayors of these cities who support open borders policies are all in a tizzy about it. They're crying. They're begging the National Guard to help. Here's the thing. These people don't pay attention to what's going on at the border. They don't know what our authorities down there are going through. So Abbott is bringing the border to them. And I can't think of a better way to get them to wake up and see what's going on here. Now, they still might not care, but if Abbott were to expand this effort to include more blue cities, then perhaps more of these Democrats would be willing to hold the Biden administration accountable. You have a few Democrats that are already doing that, but most are not. And it should be a wake-up call to these people. What New York and DC are going through are what small border towns in Texas and New Mexico and Arizona are going through. Yet they are far smaller than New York City and DC and not as nearly well equipped to handle this influx. So maybe if they're going to support these policies, maybe they should start sharing the burden. 2,000
people in New York City, and that's blowing the tops off of the local officials there. Consider 200,000 coming across in Del Rio, Texas, and the little places that are just overwhelmed by this. So, Graham, how can DC and these two mayors, how can they even say this is a surge?
Well, the first thing is, if you declare your city to be a sanctuary city, then you don't have any right to complain about any number of illegal immigrants coming to your city. Surely that's why you called yourself a sanctuary city, to welcome them in. So, go ahead and welcome them in. I've often thought that one possible solution to our entire illegal immigrant problem is to simply say, look, if you've entered this country illegally, here's the deal. We will not ever come after you as long as you move to either New York or California and never step foot outside that state again. As long as you're there, we'll
That's
leave you
kind of
alone.
hard line. That's a hard line, Graham.
Well, I mean, the two least affordable states in the country. Yeah, I think that would be a pretty hard life for them. Of course, they would be given all the benefits, everything for free until eventually, one day, even the somewhat docile residents of those two states would actually, get to the point where, okay, this is enough. Once California's got, maybe 25, 30 million illegal immigrants there wandering around, then I think things would probably change. But to me, it's ridiculous. These
I'd like to know,
these mayors of these cities have no right to complain about this because this is what they wanted.
Apparently, providing monkeypox vaccinations to these folks in transit, because they've got outbreaks in both those spots. So I would just hope that some public health measures being undertaken.
Vaccination for what? We don't have vaccinations anymore, do we?
Monkeypox was so last week. I mean, there's a
health crisis.
There's a new virus out in China now, and so we should be thinking about that. Forget monkeypox. That was.
Hey, Andrew, you people are all happy with anybody, and you accept a lot of immigrants in Canada. Can you guys do a better job, or do you think that people are going to say, "Hey, let's just start shipping them all over the place"?
Well, the thing is that with our immigration system, everyone ends up in two places, Vancouver or Toronto. Nobody ever goes to Winnipeg. Nobody ever goes to Saskatoon or Nunavut. It's all just those two places. And those two places account for half the country's population. But to touch upon what Graham was saying about these mayors complaining, Eric Adams, he was saying the other day that, our system is under complete strain and we don't have enough resources to care for all these illegal immigrants. What do you think Texas is doing? Texas had to spend $700 million last year on illegal immigrants using the healthcare system. They had to spend $1.1 billion for illegal immigrants to access state services. So the government the state of Texas has to pay for all these legal immigrants to benefit from what the government offers. But one thing too,
wait a second, Andrew. Do they have to pay for those things, or do they choose to pay for those things?
Well, the government, obviously, Greg Abbott and his predecessors, they've chosen to pay for all these. So
there is another choice they could make, by the way, which is to not pay for those things.
Exactly, and that's the problem with legal immigration. When you subsidize something, you get more of it. But one thing too about Greg Abbott, he spent $3 million to bust these illegal immigrants to those two cities. So I think that's worth pointing out to him. He's using taxpayer resource to make it for a political relations stunt, which I will concede was a funny stunt. It's my favorite political story so far of this year, but overall, it's still costing taxpayers money.
Andrew, is there an economic analysis that you know of that actually weighs the cost of keeping them in Texas versus shipping them out? Because there could be a cost. There could be an argument that it's actually cheaper for the taxpayers to send them over to New York, right?
Yeah, it's cost benefit analysis. But still, $3 million. That's still a lot of chunk of change. That's not going to achieve much. I guarantee you, this is not going to achieve anything differently at all, especially under this current administration.
It occurs to me that I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Graham.
Well, I was just going to say, it occurs to me that if only we had some kind of physical barrier, perhaps on the
or none at all. By the way,
for 4,000 people.
Let me just say,
4,000 people isn't going to change anything for except for those 4,000 people. It's not going to change the way Texas runs. It's not going to change the burden on DC or New York City. It's not going to change. But it's something to attract attention and get people to go, hey, looky there. This isn't as easy as it looks. And so why is Texas the only state, Texas, Arizona, and New Mexico, the only states that have to put up with this? California doesn't care. They're all about sanctuary. So, Scott, I haven't heard from you much on this, and I know you have a whole different idea of what illegal immigration or immigration is all about. And so let's hear from you.
Before Archduke Franz Ferdinand was murdered, a person could travel across any border in this world with any amount of money and a firearm on their hip without inspection or delay. And that was a better world than the one we're in today.
Well,
Yeah, but did they have massive welfare states that cost taxpayers billions of dollars that are
No,
being
and we
utilized?
shouldn't have those either.
Yes, there you go. I agree. So I'm with Scott on that. I'm with Scott.
But also, I'm not in favor of the idea where you can establish that you are going to pay for one thing, and then that gives you entree to control other things. So, for instance, Andrew, you could say, well, if we have public funding of emergency hospital services like we do in the United States, you go to a hospital with a gunshot wound, they don't ask you for your insurance card before they treat you. They treat you. Well, does that then give them the right to say, well, we have to ban firearms because we're now paying for gunshot wounds? So it is used as a cudgel against other liberty and freedom. So I'd prefer to have none of it and be free and suffer the consequences and reap the benefits.
That's very interesting, Scott, because I've always been completely against open borders. And yet the libertarian in me says that no government should be able to tell you where you can and cannot live. But the reason why I'm against open borders in this day and age is precisely because what Andrew just touched on is because open borders would lead to the collapse of every country in the Western world because of our massive welfare apparatus, government welfare apparatus.
Right. And if people could choose
so
to withdraw that
yeah, I'm with
apparatus.
you on that, Scott. If we did away with that, if we did away with government obligations to give things to these people, to provide them with services, if we did away with those obligations, then I view the open borders question in a different light altogether. Yeah.
Yeah, during the 2008 presidential campaign, Ron Paul, whom I interviewed on Swamponomics TV recently, he was talking about how, in theory, he supports the border. When they had border funding back then, he voted for it. But he said that's not going to achieve anything until you completely alter, revise, or abolish the welfare state. And he's exactly right. As long as you have all these goodies from Texas, New Mexico, New York, California, whatever, you're not going to stop the flow of illegal immigration. Once you do that, then perhaps you'll put the plug in it. But overall, nothing is going to unfortunately change.
I might be willing to be more open to these immigration policies if we did get rid of the welfare state. But still, there's that part of me that does think that we should restrict immigration and we should have a system and a process for people to come here legally.
The problem, however, with if you're restricting immigration, you're going to have a complete fiscal calamity of the United States government, especially when it comes to entitlement funding, like Social Security. Social Security is under complete strain, and you don't have enough workers, you don't have enough funds going in, you don't have enough taxpayer revenue going into that. If you have that under the current population, which is not growing at the rate that it should to sustain Social Security, then you're going to have that problem the next 20, 30 years of a system that's already facing bankruptcy.
Oh boy, that's a whole nother discussion. I don't think anybody on this panel thinks the Democrats got a taste of their own medicine. I mean, it certainly is something they've been pushing down the throats of Americans, living in border towns and rural communities. But will the stunt, and it is a stunt, but will this stunt change the direction of illegal immigration? Your guess is as good as mine, but hey, we'll keep you posted. Thanks, panel. Sometimes here on the Conservative Five, we like to ask the tough personal questions with one another. And it's that time again. We're going to play today, What Would You Do If You Could? And we are traveling back in time. So I'm going to ask the panelists to pick a number. I will tell you where you are, what the date is, and who you are with. And then you got to decide what you and your companion are going to do. Who's up first? Let's say Andrew.
3.
Who's with you in 3? Andrew, you are in New York City. The year is 1895, and your companion is Teddy Roosevelt, the new police commissioner. What do you want to do today?
I want to do his imitation. I want to say his favorite friend. Oh, bully. Oh, bully. I'll say that all day long, traveling streets of New York City. I keep saying, oh, bully. And then he'll throw me into the Hudson River, and then that would be the end of me. So that's how it's kind of Teddy Roosevelt.
Really?
I was not a fan of his presidency.
Anybody else want to hang out with Teddy Rex?
Out of the country, by the way. It's comments like that.
Gosh, I would love to hang out with Teddy Rex. First of all, I'd want to go horseback riding with the guy. But other than that, I mean, a million things. Wouldn't you want to ask a million questions? Anyone?
Oh yeah, fascinating guy. Yeah, I'd love to hang out with him. You know, he's one of those kind of he's one of those somewhat unique individuals in history that is both a, you know, kind of a that statesman and warrior combination always fascinates me. So yeah, I'd love to go. I'd love to spend a week with him.
All right. Scott Cosenza.
Well, my focus would be on trying to get him to convince FDR to not be such a horrible president in some regard. I'm not sure how I would accomplish that, but
you got to get rid of your cousin, dude.
That's what I would try to do. Convince him to not.
All right,
be
Graham,
one of
pick
the
a
worst
number.
Presidents ever.
4.
Well, Graham, let's see. You are in Rochester, New York.
Where's that?
Your companion is what?
Where's that? I'm just kidding.
It's in New York.
Yeah.
Rochester.
There's
Your
a Rochester in
companion-
England. That's the one I know.
Oh my gosh, this is like a struggle.
Okay,
with
go on.
linguistics.
Sorry. Sorry.
All right.
Go ahead.
Your companion is Frederick Douglass, the publisher of the newspaper The North Star. How do you spend your time today?
I would spend my time trying to console him about how badly his profession was going to turn out many, many years after his death.
That's cold-blooded.
I would tell him that he's going to be not just rolling over in his grave, but spinning in it. You know, I don't know. Whenever you're meeting, if you can go back in time and meet a prominent person in the news industry, in the journalism business, I would love to. I'd love to ask them the same kind of questions that I'd probably ask a modern journalist, just to see the differences or the similarities. Because of course, in this day and age, we always complain about journalists being biased and the politicization of newspapers and the news media. And we, you know, a lot of people talk about it as if this is some kind of recent event. But the fact of the matter is, journalism has always been tainted by politics and by corruption and by cozy relationships between journalists and politicians, or journalists and business people, and it's always been like that. So I'd be fascinated just to speak with him about that, just to confirm what I believe, and that is that journalism really hasn't changed an awful lot. It's maybe become more blatant and out in the open these days, but it was always this way. You know, Thomas Jefferson, who the media hated him, he hated the media. You know, he once said something along the lines of the most honest thing you can read in any newspaper is the advertisements. So it's always been like that. So yeah, I'd love to have a discussion with him about that, just to confirm, you know, what I believe about the fact that it's really not changed all that much.
There's a great
What about you, Jeff?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry, Andrew.
Wait. So I couldn't hear a lot. Who was a person?
Potatoes, no problem. I mean, so we
Jeff, you got to pay attention.
Yeah.
You're gonna end up, you know, staying after school and doing the erasers.
Yeah.
Frederick Douglass, 1850.
Frederick Douglass. I mean, Frederick Douglass. I mean, there's just so much, and I wouldn't even.
Are you going to be starstruck and babble for an hour or so?
Yeah, but I mean, it's like, I would just want to watch what he does. I mean, the work that he did, the bravery that he showed, you know, in the abolitionist movement, and you know, back then, I mean, slavery was still going on, and I would just want to I don't know. That's a tough one. That's like too much. Like, just to see how he ended up forming his views, and to understand, you know, what he's made of. I mean, I don't know. I probably wouldn't want to say much. I just want to just pick his brain and see how he shaped himself.
What is I find fascinating, actually, that I never even mentioned it, but the fascinating thing about Frederick Douglass is if you read a lot of what he said, the ideas that he expressed, they're actually very and of course, big in the a big time abolitionist, and of course, there's certain things he said that were in the context of his day and what was going on.
Mhm.
But if you read some of those things now, some of the statements he made, you think, wow, if he was. The truth is, if he was alive today and saying those exact same things that he said regarding kind of freedom and personal liberty and those kind of things, they would be interpreted in a different way today. Today, he would be called an Uncle Tom. He would be called, by the left anyway, he would be called a dangerous extremist, so it's kind of interesting. But the man was, obviously his love of freedom was founded in the fact that he was an abolitionist. But you carry that into the wider spectrum of the world, and a lot of things he said were really as true today as they were then. As guess what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I mean, he was foundational to conservatism. He was one of the foundational figures.
You could say that.
Yeah.
Guys, this is just for fun, not a political discussion here. We're not going to
Thank you.
Come on, have some fun, guys. Come on.
Woo-hoo! Let's have some fun.
But there's plenty to admire about Frederick Douglass.
Okay,
I'm not sure he was that funny.
We're going to move on to the next number. Okay, I need to pick Scott.
Number 1, baby.
This could be interesting. You are in New Orleans. The year is 1840, and your companion is Marie Laveau, the voodoo queen. What are your plans today, Scott?
I don't know anything about Ms. Laveau. So I would say let's go to get some beignets, because who doesn't like to do that, right? That I think,
really?
and I think that
don't you want to learn how to put a spell on somebody, or
Now you see me? Now you don't.
make a doll?
No, I don't believe any of that nonsense, and I tend not to humor people who do. So I'm the wrong one for Ms. Laveau. She sounds like a lovely person, though, I'm sure.
I've seen her grave.
Oh, cool. That's cool. Yeah, she's quite a famous person. Who's next?
Yeah,
Who's left?
Me.
You are?
Yes.
Which one do you want?
I'll take 5.
You are near Sheridan, Wyoming. The year is 1876, and your companion is General George Custer, the same guy who's planning a raid on the Sioux at the Little Bighorn. What do you do for the day?
Don't do it, Custer. Don't do it. Don't do it.
Wonder if you could talk him out of it. Go back and
That's what I would spend my time doing. I'd be trying to talk him out of it. And if I couldn't, then I'd find the quickest exit.
Yep, I want to just leave and not say goodbye to anyone.
I would say, hey, General Custer, let's go get some custards.
God dang. All right. Anybody else on this one? Because I think have I not called on anybody yet?
Now you got everybody except for yourself.
Okay. So the last question is mine. And that would be, you are in Chicago, and the year is 1930. Your companion for the day is Elliot Ness. What are your plans? Stay away from Al Capone.
Yo, how you doing?
Stay as far away from Al Capone as I can get, and maybe go to the pump room and have a nice lunch. Yeah, that's not anything I really.
No
speakeasies. Elliot Ness was kind of cute, so I guess I could stare at him too.
It's not Kevin Costner, Sarah. It's Elliot Ness.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I wouldn't mind hanging out with him for a day either.
That's my point. It wouldn't.
Anybody else?
Elliot
Anybody want to weigh in?
I'll say this. I don't like these names. I don't like these time frames. Send me the 1930s to California, New York with Rita Hayworth and a bottle of hooch with a typewriter, and that's the life. Send me those places with those people. That's where I want to go.
I try to
Rita
convince
Hayworth's
Ness,
arms.
I try to convince Ness to turn in his badge and fight for the right way, which is against prohibition.
Well, thank God it ended. Or the rest of us would be a little bit stressed out because we'd be breaking the law a lot. All right, guys. Well, that didn't go as smooth as planned, but thanks for tuning in. And be sure to leave us your Just for Fun suggestions in the comments below. Thanks, panel. That's it for our Conservative 5 panel today. Check out our other C5 shows and segments on your favorite video platform. YouTube, Vimeo, Rumble. We're on them all, as well as Liberty Nation has its own Roku channel where you can see all of our TV productions. Thanks for tuning in, and remember to surf on over to libertynation.com or join us on the Member Zone, just $17.76 for the year. Special thanks to our fantastic editor and post coordinator, Frank Diorio. And thanks for joining us today. I'm Sarah Cowgill, filling in for Lisa K. Donner. And this has been a production of libertynation.com, where truth is making a comeback.